There's some lessons I think you and I can learn from the Israelis. And I really just gleaned these from my visits there and my friendships there, the years I've spent there. One's a little apart from that, but it has to do with what's happening in our world today and current events. We talked a little bit about leaving our citizens behind in Afghanistan and abandoning our allies and relinquishing that country to the Taliban, but there's really a larger picture. It was a statement into the Muslim world. Truthfully, it was an emboldening of Iran. It was a declaration that we weren't working to inhibit Iranian ambition for the region, specifically their nuclear ambition. Once again, we became complicit in that Iranian objective. We've added momentum to it. It makes the nuclear threat to Israel more real. It makes terrorism a part of our future at home. One of the most brilliant Israelis I know in understanding international affairs said to me, sitting at his kitchen table, that if we didn't stand up to Iranian nuclear ambition, we were opening our own nation to an unprecedented exposure to terrorism. What you're watching on the international stage is not apart from your backyard. It may seem like it's a world away in a country you can't find on the map without just a moment, but it will affect our lives. Is it appropriate to resist Iranian nuclear ambition? Well, I believe it is. Iran is recognized by the international community, not by the United States or some subset within our nation. They're recognized by the international community to be the world's greatest state sponsor of terrorism. They sponsor terrorism globally. Why would we want them to have possession of nuclear weapons? We have adamantly, as our nation, we have adamantly resisted Israelis in building homes or expanding their homes or putting businesses in some part of their country. We have a long track record of having an opinion about what happens in the Middle East. Why would we not have one about Iran? And it's worth noting, it's not just the U.S. who is resisting. There are many in the global community. There are many other Middle Eastern nations that don't want Iran to have nuclear weapons. So this whole notion about Iran and nuclear ambition is a matter of prayer. Folks, until you've prayed, politicians won't change. Don't be angry at politicians or political parties. Don't get torqued up about the White House or the House of Congress or somebody else. Get on your knees. That's the power we're invested in. It's a greater power than nuclear weapons. It's a greater power than politics or votes. And until the church restores ourselves to the position of prayer and believe in the power of prayer, we limit what God will do in history. We have an assignment. He deserves a hand for that. Israel's been chosen, but it's worth noting that the pathway's not easy. Because I think you and I imagine if God chooses us or calls us, or we understand we have a God assignment, we're expecting Him to kind of annihilate the enemy. David and Goliath like. Deuteronomy chapter 10 and verse 14 says, "To the Lord your God belong the heavens, even the highest heavens, the earth and everything in it. Yet the Lord set His affection on your forefathers and loved them. He chose you, their descendants, above all the nations." This is Moses preparing the people. He's about done. He's trying to help them understand their position. He said, God chose you amongst all the peoples on the planet to be a demonstration of His love. You're a message to the world. Wow. Imagine if you went home today and there was an angel sitting on the front step, legs crossed, kind of kicked back, enjoying the fall air. I brought you a message. You have been chosen to be a messenger to the world. Well, wow. That's what God said to the Jewish people. And just in case you don't know, He said the same thing to the non-Jewish people, to the church. 1 Peter 2, He's writing now to a non-Jewish audience, you're a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people belonging to God, that you may declare the praises of Him who called you out of darkness into His wonderful light. People say to me all the time, I wish I knew what God wanted me to do. He told you to declare the praises of Him who called you out of darkness into His wonderful light. When you've exhausted that, when you've told everybody that, you can do next. Once you were not a people, but now you're the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. I urge you as aliens and strangers in the world to abstain from sinful desires they war against your soul. To the Jewish people at the beginning of the story, God said, I've called you out of all the people on the earth. And now the church is comprised of those people from every nation, race, language, and tribe, grafted into the covenant that He made with Abraham. Not separate from it, not apart from it. The blessing of Abraham has come to the church. Wow! But now hear the next portion. Hebrews chapter 12. Our fathers disciplined us for a little while as they thought best, but God disciplines us for our good, that we may share in His holiness. Without holiness, the Scripture says, nobody sees the Lord. He disciplines us so that His holiness might grow in our lives. He disciplined the Jewish people. There's a whole book filled with it. We read the stories and kind of shake our heads. How could they have been so naive? Why were they so quick to turn to ungodliness? What was wrong with them? They must be defective. It's just a shame they were such slow learners. I've been in class with Jewish students. They're not slow learners. Slow learners. The truth is, we run just as quickly to ungodliness. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who've been trained by it. You see, to be identified as God's people means you're going to be subjected to His discipline. That He's going to care about your character formation. That He is determined to bring training into our lives. Wow. Well, God, I didn't really sign up for that. I just didn't want to go to hell. I mean, I heard the preacher say there was a heaven and a hell, and this is how you got to go to heaven, and this is how you got to avoid hell. So I said, I'll do that. I don't want to go to hell. I'm a smart person. I got that. Option A, option B. I choose A. But with A comes participation in a kingdom. Kingdom assignments, kingdom authority, kingdom discipline. Well, wait a minute. You should wait a minute, because if you don't intend to accept the kingdom assignments and the kingdom discipline, you shouldn't imagine you're a part of the kingdom. Because God disciplines His kids. We see it in history with the Jewish people. They lost their place in the promised land He swore to them forever. They had to stay out of it for 2,000 years. They were hunted from pillar to post, driven from one nation after the other. It's not just the Jewish people that have suffered. To be in the land of Israel today requires tremendous sacrifice. It requires vigilance. They have to stand watch. All of their children serve in the military, men and women. And they don't serve on some distant reserve post far back from the front lines. Israel is the front line. All of their children serve. Vigilance is required. They have a commitment to protect their children that embarrasses me when I look at the way we treat our own. They have persistent enemies. They submit to discipline of God. They'll either humble themselves or be humiliated, and so will we. This notion of anti-Semitism, the hatred of the Jewish people, and this expressions of anti-Christ, the hatred of Jesus as Messiah, are two sides of the same coin. But sometimes it's easier to see a group that's not you. We look at the anti-Semitism and we see the tension of standing against evil, standing against those who would destroy the women and children in the land of Israel. That tension of standing against evil while they're being reviled by the rest of the world. Now, I would submit to you that's precisely what we see happening with the church. The tension of standing against ungodliness and saying that's not really the best way to go while we're being reviled by the communities around us as outdated, outmoded, old-fashioned, unaware, not progressive. It's a very real thing. Romans 12, verse 21 says, don't be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. That's our assignment. Well, Pastor, I didn't really want this. I just wanted to go to heaven. Remember, I told you, I didn't want to go there. I want to go there. It's not a complete presentation. I want to be healthy, but I want to eat sugar. In fact, I'd like to be healthy and eat only cake and ice cream. That's my preference. I give you my vegetables. I'll take your cake and ice cream. Well, you can wish it all you want. It's removed from reality. And you're removed from the truth to imagine that you can have eternity in the presence of God and spend your days under the sun indifferent to Him. That's why we call Jesus Lord. And when you watch Israel, you understand they wouldn't stay in the land without the vigilance, without the determination, without the sacrifice. Their enemies aren't yielding. They're not going away. They don't play fair. They take a long view. And so does your enemy. So does your enemy. The assignment's to overcome evil, not to be overcome by it. In the face of hatred, in the face of the fear and the misinformation and the violence, in face of the Christian hatred of the Jewish people, the greatest destroyer of the Jewish people has been the Christian church. It's not even close. It wasn't the Nazis. It's not the Muslims. The average Israeli on the street is far more comfortable with the Muslim world than they are with the Christian world. They understand Hitler to have been a Christian. Germany was a Christian nation. Europe was Christian Europe when they allowed the Jews to be rounded up and shipped to the camps for destruction. You'll excuse them if they miss the distinction when we say, well, those weren't good Christians. That distinction is lost on our Jewish friends. You need to pay attention to what's happening in the world. I keep asking you to watch and listen and think with me. Socialism and communism are being celebrated these days as good things, despite the havoc they have wreaked in the world. Despite the suffering, more than 100 million people in the last century attributed their deaths attributed to communism in our world. Not ancient history, recent history. I found a quote from Stalin. He's the second leader of the Soviet Union. Seems relevant to what we're watching in the world today. If you don't know, Stalin very aggressively shuttered churches and synagogues, even mosques. He ordered the killing and imprisonment of thousands of religious leaders. He wanted to eliminate the concept of God, but this was the reasoning. I quote, he saw this as a way of getting rid of a past that was holding people back and marching towards the future of science and progress. Sounds familiar. We got to make those people be quiet. We're going to take away their past. We're going to discredit their past. We're going to divide them. We're going to lead them in a more enlightened way, a way filled with equity, not equality. Anti-Semitism and the spirit of Antichrist are two sides of the same coin. To the extent that the Jewish people have been hated in the world for centuries, in nation after nation after nation, the Bible tells us as we come to the end of the age, the Christians, the Christ followers, will be hated by all nations. It's an interesting contrast. I'm going to close with this. It's Matthew 24. Jesus is talking about the end of the age. He said, you'll be handed over to be persecuted and put to death, and you'll be hated by all nations because of me. But then he gives us an assignment. In the face of that, he gives us an assignment. He who stands firm to the end will be saved. Wow. What do we do in the midst of that hatred? Having done everything to stand therefore. And then the assignment, and this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all the nations. And the end will come. That's what we're doing. We're preaching the gospel in the whole world. Not from pulpits and not from churches, from your lives and your relationships and your friends and your networks. Folks, God moves in history. He secured the Jewish people in a little strip of land in spite of the hatred of millions of people and the consternation of most of the planet, and they're flourishing. He'll do the same for you. He'll do the same for you. You can trust Him. Hey, this is Pastor Allen. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, like it, and most importantly, share it with your friends. If you want to be notified when there's new content, when we post new material, if you'll just subscribe to my channel and hit the bell, you'll get the notification. Most of all, I pray God blesses you as you continue on your spiritual journey and open your heart to the Lord. God bless.